What are you going to do if you manage people, if you work right next to an individual, like many of us do? What are you going to do to make sure that they get vaccinated? Can you do anything? Quentin Brogdon is a legal expert, and he's willing to give us some of his time to talk about this. Quentin, good to have you going down the road with us.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Want to talk a little bit, if we can, about what you can do. The very question that a lot of people are asking you, because they're going to work right next to somebody that won't take the vaccine, or they're going to see their healthcare costs go up because people won't take the vaccine. It's going to be tough to get herd immunity without it. So what legally can you do?
Let's first start with the idea, Joel, that just because you can do something legally as an employer doesn't mean you necessarily should. But to talk about the theoretical issue of what you can do, probably, and some of your listeners as employees may not want to hear this, probably you as an employer can require your employees to take the vaccine, particularly if they work in high-risk occupations, if they're nurses or work in a nursing home. But even white-collar workers or restaurant workers probably can be required by employers to take the vaccine under the law unless they have a sincerely held religious belief. There's a law called Title VII, a federal law that comes into place, or they have a disability under the American with Disabilities Act that makes them very susceptible to harmful side effects from the vaccination. Then as an employer, you have to reasonably accommodate, if you can, those employees.
So it's really no different than when we all went to school, right? I mean, they asked you if you had your shots. I mean, what you're saying, Quentin, is it's no different than that.
That's right. Now, you, as a condition of continuing in school, or your parents continuing in when you're a young child, must have your vaccination. That's something the state, sometimes obviously private schools as well, require as a condition of getting that free schooling or the schooling that you're paying for if it's private. It's a little dicier when it comes to employers, but the laws are pretty clear that public safety generally trumps the rights of employees. It's a balancing test. It varies case to case. You look at the type of job involved, but probably in any type of employment right now, because of this vaccine and the health and safety risk posed by it, because of the pandemic rather, and the health and safety risk posed by it, a mandatory vaccine would probably pass legal muster.
So obviously I work in TV and I work in radio. I work in two different forms of media. You know, I realize that's a little bit different than being a healthcare worker. My wife is a healthcare worker. You know, if you're the healthcare industry, in our particular area, Sanford is the big player. You've got Catholic Health and you've got Sanford as two of the big players that are out there across the state that's listening to you right now. If I'm going to Sanford Hospital and one of those individuals there hasn't taken the vaccine, has been unwilling to take the vaccine, I don't want to go there. I mean, I don't want to go there. And so I understand the right that the hospital would have, but does the worker have any recourse? Do they, if they take it and some of the fears that they have of it really become true?
Well, there are federal protections in place for vaccines that protect the companies involved and limit recoveries. And then there are some other specific protections in place related to the COVID vaccine. So generally, I mean, the idea that any vaccine or any medicine we take is going to be 100% safe and never have any side effects is just not the reality. I've done pharmaceutical litigation. For example, aspirin. Aspirin's on sale in every one of our drugstores and in department stores and in grocery stores. We know as a society to a certainty that some people every year are going to die from bad reactions to aspirin. But we as a society have decided that the benefits of aspirin outweigh its risks. That's not to equate directly aspirin to the vaccine, but the benefits of the vaccine, our government and society have decided outweigh the risk. And yes, there are some risk and there will be some bad side effects, but for most people, the vaccine has been determined to be safe.
Can you bring a case concerning one vaccine over the other? they're being administered differently. Some require 2 shots, some require 1 shot. I mean, can you make a legal argument that I should have had then this vaccine?
You could, but it's not the kind of case I can tell you that I would be interested in taking. In fact, probably would be interested in taking any vaccination case, because many of the jurors are going to believe that, yeah, there are risks in a vaccine, there are risks in a polio vaccine, there are risks in a measles vaccine, there are risks even in a flu vaccine, but the benefits outweigh the risks. And then there are caps and legal liability issues. We could spend a whole hour talking about those that make the cases very unattractive. Some would say deliberately unattractive to attorneys in order to incentivize companies to make and distribute these vaccines.
What about a legal amount or a fiscal amount? I mean, what about, we're going to, for example, on your taxes, we're going to give you $1,000 credit if you take the vaccine. If you don't take the vaccine, we're not going to give you that credit. Would that be an argument that, hey, it's the tax code? You can't treat one person differently than the other, even though I know we all are on taxes anyway.
And it sounds like you're talking about the separate but related issue of the government requiring a vaccine versus an employer requiring a vaccine. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Because I want to see if the government incentivizes this whole process.
The government, there's a case from 1905, Jacobson versus Massachusetts, that went up to the United States Supreme Court. And in that case, the United States Supreme Court upheld the right of the state of Massachusetts to require a vaccination for smallpox, or the people who refused to be vaccinated would be fined the whopping amount of $5. I guess in 1905, that was quite a sum of money. Yeah. Obviously, Obamacare was premised upon the idea not of mandatory purchase of health insurance, but you would pay a penalty at tax time if you didn't buy health insurance, because the thought was, and the theory was, the rest of us who bought it and paid our taxes were subsidizing you if you got in a car wreck, for example. So all of these things have been tried, and there's authority out there for the idea that a government could require it. They could impose a penalty of some type if you didn't get it.
So we've been talking about if you won't get it. What about if you want it? What about if you're one of the ones that says, you know what, this pecking order that you put in place isn't fair. I deserve to have it just as soon as the other. What about that?
Well, you start with the idea that governmental units are immune from lawsuits until and unless they specifically pass laws that say we can be sued in certain circumstances. That's how it is in every state. I've handled cases all across the United States. In every state, when you attempt to sue a governmental unit, the default is you cannot sue them. And then if you can and when you can sue them, only for certain types of decisions in certain types of circumstances. I can't imagine a lawsuit that says somehow the government, in making the decision about the priority of who gets vaccinated, made a mistake and it hurt me specifically. Yeah. Because the priorities are pretty much the same as I've heard them in the news: first responders, those in high-risk occupations, and then we go from there. So having a jury or a judge jump in and second guess that, I can't see that that would go very far at all, if you even could, in theory, advance a lawsuit.
Quentin, if I ever get in trouble, put your cell phone away, because clearly you're bright enough where I may call you to get me out of trouble, okay? Thanks for coming on with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joel. Stay safe.
You bet. You too.
Take care.